Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Delgado from the ECISD Marketing Department, so I'll be running the controls tonight. Um, we're here for the Facebook Live with Mr. Toscano. As we are all aware, the school district is rapidly growing, and we are here tonight to discuss the implications of that. As always, we welcome your comments and questions. You can drop them, and we will try our best to get to all of them. So, without further ado, Mr. Toscano, if you're ready to go.
Good evening, Sam, and good evening, East Central community. As Sam mentioned, we'll be talking a little bit tonight about our response to the residential development in our area and its implications on our enrollment at our schools. Sam, if you would pull up a couple of slides from the bond presentation in the fall. Many of you who had an opportunity to review the information that was shared regarding the proposed bond in the fall were made aware of our demographer's findings regarding the implications for enrollment. And what we shared then was that all of our elementary schools were growing in enrollment very quickly. The projections for this year in the third column, 2021, actually at this point of the year have been exceeded at most campuses, specifically at Tradition. Tradition will be the first school that is going to reach 120% enrollment. The projection for Tradition this year was 807, and they're actually right at 900 students, just under. And so we're exceeding that. As a response to that, the district is forced to install portables. And if you live in the Tradition area, you've seen construction out there adjacent to the playground area and adjacent to the building. And we're putting infrastructure in to put 4 portable buildings. We'll install 3 for this year with the ability to expand to a 4th. And each one of those buildings is a double classroom portable building. So we'll add 6 classrooms at Tradition for next year. Next slide, please, Sam. What we also shared with the community is that the implications on our junior highs were also such that we were seeing rapid enrollment at Heritage, and that Legacy was going to be able to handle the residential development we were seeing through this particular demographic study period, which was 10 years, so through 2030. The projected enrollment at Heritage for this year was 1,257. We're actually over 1,300 now, and the projected enrollment at Legacy was 1,100, and we're actually around 1,070. So Heritage is exceeded in the enrollment projection due to the rapid residential development in that area, and Legacy is a little bit short of that. So in a nutshell, what that means is that we've got to balance some enrollment at Heritage and Legacy. Given that the bond failed, we've got to really mitigate the enrollment impact for about 4 or 5 years. It takes about 2.5 years to build a new school and move into it, roughly, sometimes as many as 3. But we will probably not come back to the voters until next year. The board is commissioned another demographic study just to make sure that what we saw in the last study is going to be accurate, and we're suspecting that there's a possibility that it's going to be much more rapidly affecting our enrollment than we thought last year. So with that new information, the board will re-engage the community and determine what those needs are going to look like for new schools. But until then, we've got to, again, balance enrollment and maximize the use of our facilities. As far as those portables I mentioned a minute ago at Tradition, there will be restrooms accessible to those portables. All right. So if you'd go to the proposed boundary changes for our junior highs. So all of the families of children who are impacted by these changes have been personally contacted at this point. Many of you who are going to be affected by these middle school boundary changes have also received a letter or will be receiving a letter in the next day or two that summarizes everything we're talking about tonight, as well as gives you a link to an exemption form to request an exemption from these boundary changes. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But this is in the salmon color is the boundaries for heritage, and in the lime green is the boundaries for legacy. And the candy stripe sections are the boundaries that are proposed to shift from heritage to legacy. Because of the numbers in the data, which always drives our boundary decisions. I mean, the numbers make those decisions for us. We work with our demographer to kind of look at enrollment projections. We look at residencies occupied in all of the subdivisions, as well as we look at the developments that are coming. And they help us to determine how we can best balance the enrollment by shifting boundaries, but also do it in the least invasive way. Boundary changes are very stressful and a pain, quite frankly, for all of us and our families. And so we try to do this as infrequently as possible. But when we have to do it, we try to do it in the least invasive way possible. So the areas that you see there to the south are around the Southern Road area. And there are a couple of subdivisions in that area that are developed and developing. I believe Southern Hills is one of those. And students who are currently at Heritage who live in that subdivision or are slated to go to Heritage who are in that subdivision will now be zoned to Legacy. In the middle there, the large area around Hildebrandt Road is a subdivision that is broke ground. It's being developed, but no homes are there yet. So all of the families that move into that subdivision when homes are built would have been going to Heritage, but they will be going to Legacy. And then in the north section there are several subdivisions. We're talking about Blue Rock Springs, Blue Rock Ranch, Southern Ranch, Foster Meadows between South Foster and Foster Meadows Road, South Gross Ranch Mobile Home Park, as well as, well, that's all those in that cluster there. And so those subdivisions, again, were slated to go to Heritage or are currently going to Heritage. They'll be moving to Legacy. And what this effectively allows us to do is move approximately 250 students from Heritage to Legacy, which would balance that enrollment. And because Heritage is slated to grow faster than Legacy, it gives us that 4 to 5 year window where we'll be able to avoid portables and we'll be able to avoid reaching that 120% capacity at Heritage and really maximize the use of our facilities and keep everybody safe and equitably staffed. But given that boundary changes are very difficult and sometimes they're not the best situation for a particular family structure, there is an exemption process. And so, Sam, if you could share the exemption form with our viewers, please. In the letter that some of you already received, there'll be a link to this particular exemption form. For those of you who feel like it's not in your child's best interest to move campuses for next year, you could simply fill out this exemption form. At the bottom of the form is just a few questions. When you submit it, we'll get that. The timeline is by May 1st. We'll review those. And the only thing about the exemption is that transportation is not going to be provided. So you would have to be able to provide transportation for your child. But short of that, most exemptions are likely to be approved. And so we are really 1 year away from not being able to have flexibility. And so this is optimal in that next year we really have the room that if it is an exemption that you prefer, that room will be available to approve that. And so this is one of the reasons why we're doing it a little bit sooner than is necessary, because if we waited an additional year, there would be no flexibility and it would be a hard line shift. And again, our experience with boundary changes in the past is that doesn't always work well for families. We also have a QR code that is going to take you to this form. And so you could simply hover over this QR code if you're on the call, and it'll take you directly to that form. But we'll also, again, include the link to this form in the letter you'll receive. But also we'll put the link to the form on our website. Again, the deadline is May 1st. A few other things that I want to talk about is, again, I want to reiterate that every family that is directly impacted by this has already been personally contacted. In the next 2 weeks, you'll also be contacted by the campus that you will be zoned to go to next year. You'll probably hear from their principal or assistant principal or someone on the leadership team. And they're basically going to call you to talk to you about your intentions, hopefully to encourage you to give them a chance to schedule an open house and meet the teacher and give you a chance to tour the facility, and to meet the principal and the administration and the teaching staff. And I think that if you'll at least do that before you make your final decision about an exemption, you'll find that all of our facilities are equitably outfitted. You're going to see the same amenities in terms of uh, facilities and resources, instructional materials, instructional technology. They're very, very similar at every one of our schools. And you're also going to see that the opportunities for your kids, the instructional and academic programs, and the staff quality are going to be very similar. And so we encourage you to complete the exemption if that's what's best for you. But again, you have until May 1st to do that. And I would also encourage you to visit the school that you're slated to go to meet the principal and their staff, and to at least collect all of the information before you make a final decision. In addition to that phone call, in May, we plan on sending parent link reminders to the families that are impacted, just as a reminder. We also will follow up in the upcoming weeks with a active link on the transportation page that if you put in your address, if it's in the areas that have been rezoned, it will give you information about your new bus and bus route and times. And so that information will be followed up in June and July with a postcard and some final information about your transportation, um, changes, et cetera. I'm seeing some questions about the bond, actually a lot of questions about the bond. And again, I think the community is very aware of the needs that we have as a school system regarding space. The majority of the bond really was for new facilities to address growth. Unfortunately, that didn't pass. It wasn't the right time for the community, but the growth is still coming. And so some of the things that we hope to avoid were portables. We hope to avoid boundary changes as soon as we're having to do it. But these are the things we're going to try to do first, just to mitigate the impacts of rapid enrollment in certain areas of the district. So again, we can level enrollment in all of our facilities, maximize the use, and hopefully mitigate those effects as long as we can until we can get back out in front of the community next year to share the needs that we have, and hopefully present it in a way that the community feels more like they can support. But until then, this is the first step. Now, because we're probably on a 3 to 4 year timeline in terms of if we were to bring a bond forward next year, if that bond were to pass, and the timeline for new construction being 2.5 to 3 years, what it also means is that within the next year or two, we'll probably have to go back out to the community and look at boundary changes for all of our elementary schools as well. But we're going to, push that down the road as far as we can. But keep in mind that what we're seeing in all of our schools is that the majority of our campuses are exceeding their enrollment projections that our demographer had slated for this year. We're seeing that enrollment seem to accelerate, and that is why the board has proposed or has commissioned an additional study, just so we can know if those numbers were accurate. Because if we're seeing more rapid enrollment than even we thought then the bond that we may need to bring forward next year might look even. It might look different. We may have greater needs than we thought. So I'm outside of that, I don't see a lot of questions. Now's the time. If you got any questions, it would be a good time to ask. What this tells me is that your principals at your current Child's Campuses did a really good job reaching out to you and sharing this information with you and answering any questions that you might have had. Tracy, I see your question about a middle school in the future. The bond did have a middle school slated. That middle school would be adjacent to Tradition. That would give us 3 junior highs and one in the north, one in the west, and one in the east. And so that is currently the projected need. Looking at some of the other questions. Kristen, I would encourage you to talk to your campus principal. I've got your information here now, and I'll pass that along as well to Ashley Colas in my office so we can see about other opportunities to get you involved at the campus level, but also at the district level, and of course, on any committees that that the board assembles going forward. All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes in case there's any other questions. Again, look for that letter to hit your mailbox if it hasn't already. It will summarize everything that I described today. Again, it'll have a map of the boundaries that I shared with you today, as well as a link to the exemption form. Contact your campus principal if you have any additional questions. I would also say that in the next couple of weeks, anticipate a phone call from the principal, Ms. Triano, over at Salado, if you're slated to go there, or from Miss Barber or someone from her team at Legacy, just to give you a chance to come visit and meet the staff. I will restate the subdivisions that are impacted. Blue Rock Springs, Blue Rock Ranch, or Blue Ridge Ranch, Southern Hills, Southern Ranch, Foster Meadows, specifically the part between South Foster and Foster Meadows, South Cross Ranch, Mobile Home Park, Southern Lake, and the new unit on Hildebrandt that is currently under development between W.W. White and Foster Road. Yeah, Thora Gendry, really good question, asking about the needs of the south end of town. Definitely rapid development there as well. The facility study committee in the bond that was proposed did identify the need for an elementary school in the south as well as an expansion of Highland Forest Elementary School that would have added an additional 80 seats there. Along with some pretty substantial renovations, about $6 million at the time. So definitely some needs on the south side of the district as well. The district's growing in the north, it's growing in the south. It's growing in all directions, quite frankly. So thanks for that question, Ms. Gendry. Yes, Ms. Estrada, we'll get that rezoning map posted on the website. But again, it's also going home to all those affected, and we'll get it out to the rest of the community as well, and through all of our channels. All right. Thanks to all of you who were able to join this evening. Again, please reach out to your campus administration. We'll continue to push out information. Those of you directly affected, look out for that letter in the mailbox, as well as upcoming correspondence with you, as well as some additional opportunities to get engaged with the board and the community to evaluate our circumstances. On May 10th, the board will be presented the updated demographic findings. And so we're really anticipating learning if our current circumstances are going to get worse, or if they're going to level off, or if they're going to regress. I mean, the economy is so unpredictable right now, but we certainly see enrollment happening a little sooner than they projected last year. So we'll keep informing the community. We'll keep engaging you, and hopefully you can be an active member of any of the processes going forward. We look forward to that. All right. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.